so glad to have everybody here on a Sunday afternoon. So today we have this great pleasure of welcoming our current artist in residence, Benjamin Work, to give us the artist talk and also share some of his experiences, living Tonga, and also this relation with our current exhibition, Koloa, Women, Art and Technology. So before we start, I'll give an introduction of Benjamin. Benjamin is an artist currently based in the Kingdom of Tonga. He has a solid grounding in aerial painting, with his initial creative output centered around subculture and pop cultural influences that emerged from North America in the 1970s to the 80s. Since then, Benjamin's both visual language, reference design elements, and semiotics particular to Tonga weaponry and culture. Primarily a painter, his practice also extends across a diverse range of projects, which include large-scale murals, print-based media, and photography. Benjamin has exhibited in a number of group and solo exhibitions, including with the Malcolm Smith Gallery in Auckland and also Mac Friday, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you. Ha'umua ke tao o matamahina popo ke tao uta o whanongo. Si ileo o e teiko. A siene siu he lilifa. He moana loloto. Ko siene whakalave tala. Ki he hingano. Hake atu ki tō awha. Tu'uai o mamata. Me hange ha sio ata. Siene tapa me he waha. Ke whaa whakamatala. Tō onga whakalata ai siale tafa. Come, let us go together and view the wondrous moonrise, and let's tarry and hear the cry of the teiko, flying around the sheer cliffs, over the airy deep. It's his love serenading to the hingano. Turn up the treeless plain. Stand now and look, how like a great mirror shining from the ocean. Ah, but I simply cannot describe to you in full so lovingly winning ways of the siale tafa. Malo taulava hoiki mokainga. My name is Benjamin Work, and it's a real honor to be here today. And I'd just like to firstly acknowledge God, our Creator. I'd like to acknowledge Lady Tuna Whelakepa that's here. It's a real honor to have you here, to travel with you. Also, I'd like to acknowledge Cosmin and Vivian, the whole Parasite team. Most of you are here, and thank you for having me in this space. Thank you for providing access and time and space for me and my wife Yaeli to come to this beautiful island, from one island to another, and it's a real honor to be here. The poem that I've just read was written by an unknown poet from my mother's village, where she was born, Toinekivale in Vava'u, in Tonga. And it talks about this intimate relationship that Tongans have with creation, their surroundings, the knowledge, but also the beauty. And also it's very rich and deep, full of metaphors that are not direct. Throughout my practice, this theme of relationships to creation, to people, tending to those relationships, those spaces, is primarily my main focus. And today I want to take you on a bit of a journey. I just want to share a bit about where I'm from, and what I've done, and also what I'm currently working on, as you can see with this title. So please bear with me as I go through, and I use some notes as well, just so I get everything and I remember everything. I really feel this is a calling in my life. It's not just a vocation, it's something that I was born to do. So it's been a journey, and so let's go. Well, firstly, I thought a big red arrow might help, just in case there's anyone else left in doubt in this room where the Kingdom of Tonga is. So obviously the beautiful place of Hong Kong is up to our top left, and we are there right down in the centre of the moana. Everything revolves around Tonga. If you accept that, then we can move on together. Our capital is Nuku'alofa. There is a rough estimate of our current population, and we have around 170 islands, so it's not just the one. In 1875, the paramount chief of the time across Tonga was Tauwha Ahau, who later became King George I. He, in 1875, he wrote our first constitution. I currently live on Tongatapu, which is the main island, with my wife. We live in a place that backs onto this middle lagoon. It's called Anana, and it's in the village of Ma'ufanga. The capital, Nuku'alofa, is that narrow strip that you see that's very built up. And as you can see, it's not that big. It's an interesting shape, but it is stunning. It is a beautiful landscape, and also the sea, the surrounding seas. Tongatapu is translated to the Sacred South. And upon moving there, I realised even more so why it is called the Sacred South. In 2011, Australian Aid paid for LiDAR surveying to take place across the island of Tongatapu, where they scanned the land for agricultural purposes. But in 2000 and maybe 14, somewhere around there, researchers from ANU in Canberra, Australia, got a hold of the information that was found, and they have been researching the sacred sites, and they've recorded over 10,000 man-made sites alone in Tongatapu, from burial mounds, from housing mounds, from trenches to fortifications, different ceremonial platforms, over 10,000. So no wonder this place is called the Sacred South. It plays an important role in the Pacific's history, within Polynesian history, and still today, it's still making history, because it drew Cosmin and Vivian there. So in 2011, I had this what I would call like a spiritual experience, and during this time I had this vision. It was very short but very powerful, and in it I could see, in my mind's eye, I could see myself. It was a close-up of my face, and there was black paint that came over my face, and then it started to turn red, and then the vision panned out, and then it was me standing on this mound as this Tongan warrior looking person with this war club. And I came out of it, and my mother was in the vicinity, and I went straight to her. Oh, sorry, before I missed out one bit. And I heard the words To'a Motu. This is 2011, and my Tongan is not the greatest. So I went to her, and I had an idea what that meant, but she said, "Mum, does To'a Motu mean anything to you?" And she said, "Yes, it means a warrior of the island, but also it's a relative of mine's name who's in the neighbouring village, Koloa." So I'm just like, okay, what does it mean? What do I do with this? So I wanted to make it work. It wouldn't leave me. I felt that was an important thing that I saw, and I made this work as part of a group show that was at Fresh Gallery Otara, and it was curated by Emma Tavola, who was here in Hong Kong this year and spoke. She's amazing. The interesting thing was, with the show, it was her final show at Fresh Gallery, and she'd been following my work, which had been a lot of graffiti, street art things in the early days. So that's what she was expecting me to bring. And then I turn up with these framed photographs of myself. I'm like, and she's like, oh. But she really believed in what I saw and where I was going with it. So I really thank her for supporting me early on. This vision sent me on a trajectory that ultimately would lead me and my wife to live in Tonga. I've been very fortunate to have access to many museums' collections across the world. Some of the finest collections, those that are in Oxford Museum, the British Museum, but even starting with Auckland Museum, the access started through a Pacific curator there, who was there at the time, Golokesa Mahina, and she really engaged with the community, and she created a safe place that people could come and share their stories, and people could come and touch the treasures. I know it's often used object, but I like to use the word treasure because I feel object's a bit cold and lifeless, but you know, there's so much beauty and so much history and metaphors and meaning in our treasures, our koloa, and even the war clubs. Throughout the different collections, we kept coming across these war clubs, and it was the most collected item of Captain Cook's voyages in the Pacific. Out of all the islands, even Aotearoa, New Zealand, was Tongan war clubs. And I don't know if a lot of people really looked into it, especially a few artists touched on it, but it was the semiotics that I came across on the war clubs that fascinated me. Like, wow, what is this language? Because as Tongans we understand it's not just a fish. It's just a fish. It's a weird looking octopus over there. Oh yeah, it looks like two people want to kill each other. But deep, rich metaphors. What type of fish was that? Who caught that fish? Whose specialization, like what tufunga actually caught that, in which area? Or does the fish have a heliaki? Does it have a metaphor for a chief's name or a place? All these things fascinated me. So as we went throughout these different collections, I was just more and more of these beautiful iconography were right there in front of my face. And I went to the Met in New York, and we looked into their collection, and the oceanic curator there, Dr. Maya Nuku, she had an idea of actually, from our research in the museum, to take it outside, and we got a wall in Spanish Harlem. She did. It was at a school that her son went to. This is a very Pacific way, the island way of connecting, is who you know. So she talked to the the headmaster, who allowed us to have this space. And from the iconography that I saw in the Metropolitan Museum collection, I painted a mural in Spanish Harlem. So it's this idea of taking the collections from storage and giving it new life out on the streets, but also giving it access to people that would never step foot or never want to pay to enter that museum. I like what Duna was saying about our kupesi and the metaphors and how simple they are, but yet how deep and meaningful they are. This is one early example of the murals I did. This is located in East Auckland in a heavy populated Tongan area, and while I painted this, these little Tongans were hanging around throwing rocks while I was painting, and they were trying to throw rocks at the wall too, and I'm like, hey, and in that time and space I was able to share about the history and the meaning of these symbols and the connection to it, and they were saying, oh wow, we never knew, now we're going to protect it and not throw rocks at the wall anymore. That was a good time. This icon, it speaks of the tuitonga with the palatavake, so the royal headdress, the feathered headdress that was worn by the tuitonga of the time, the ruling paramount chief of Tonga. This same exact symbol can be found on many war clubs. So it's quite interesting sitting here speaking at an exhibition called Koloa, Women, Art and Technology, and here's this man sitting here. So I find it quite interesting. It's been a bit of a journey with my practice in dealing with the gender roles, even within Tongan culture. As a young Tongan, you grow up surrounded by the kupesi, surrounded by the fala and the ngatu. I had ngatu under my bed that was kept there to keep flat, and you grow up with these the iconography, so it's your main influence. But just for me personally, I wasn't sure about going down that path with tapa cloth as a male. Maybe that's some other males have no problem with that, and that's fine. But just for me, I wanted that to be a treasure for our women who have carried this practice for thousands of years. But I'm still fascinated with ngatu. So I think it was around 2014, Kolokesa Mahina was commissioned by Manukau Institute of Technology to do 2 artworks in collaboration with a contemporary artist and a women's heritage arts group. And she approached me and a contemporary artist called Leilani Kake, who is Cook Island Māori, to collaborate. So I was collaborating with this Tongan women's group, and I got to design the ngatu, where in this case, because we're in Auckland, less access to whetaki, to the natural resource, this is tupenu. So this is a material, a substitute. Obviously it's not our first choice, but because of the circumstances, we had to work with this. The work had to be fire retardant. It had to have all these specs to hang in this auditorium. So it worked out, and this apparently is the first women's group to use synthetic tapa cloth in New Zealand. Whauniteni o e vai mo ui. And they're based at a Tongan Methodist church in central Auckland. So here's a dream come true. And I was able to take this masculine, this brutal kind of, imagery from war clubs and marry that with the ngatu, with the women's group. There was a lot of consultation before the practice, before the process started. Kolakesa meeting with the ladies because they couldn't comprehend, or they was wondering why this young man wanted to come work with them. And what are these icons? They're not Tongan. They're not Tongan. We haven't seen them before. But for me, that was another aspect of these women might not have access to the British Museum, but from what I've seen, I can come back and share, and I can give everything that I've learned. And I got to sit down and explain the iconography and the meanings, the 3 royal lines of Tonga, the whakatau, and also introducing another little icon that's found on Tongan war clubs. And I think at the end of the day, the most valuable part of this process was the eating every time we gathered. We only met once a week because that's when the women's group met. And it was on a Tuesday, it was right through our Auckland winter. That hall had holes and it was windy and cold and the women had colds all the time. But yet their joy and their love and the food was abundant. They had a special place at the table for me, and I remember learning something. We had buns and they cut big slices, chunks of butter, and I was like, oh no thanks, like, guys, easy. Like, this is cheese. I was like, that's butter, that's not cheese. And here are these big chunks. I was like, okay, do as the women do, don't question. But here's the work to the right, hanging within the MIT Polytech facility in Manukau in South Auckland. In the Tivaivai collaboration with Cook Island artist Leilani Kake is hanging to the right. In 2017, my exhibition Whenua Enua was at Malcolm Smith Gallery, and I looked into the significance of name and place. I'm really interested in our relationship to those places that we come from, but also that we inhabit, that we currently inhabit. I love looking for the spiritual origins, but also the geographical origins, because they both marry. One component of this exhibition was a publication with Brendan Kitto, who you might have seen his name at the start. And he is part Cook Islander, part Scottish, and we both have that same. I'm also half Scottish, born in New Zealand though. My father's born in New Zealand, and we both grew up in the same geographical location, which is Pakuranga, a suburb of Auckland. So together we did this project with a publication, and we started to strip back the layers, because we got our own personal history, and then we got the settler history, the English that came to guard Auckland, but really were there to steal and abuse. Also going down to the Māori history, the indigenous history of the area that we called home. And the land that we grew up on and lived in is a tribe, the iwi, called Ngai Tai ki Tamaki. So Ngai Tai of Tamaki, which is Auckland. And Ngai Tai is sea, the tides. And these people, this beautiful people group, lived mainly along the seaside and on the various islands within Auckland. At our research, every time we would go anywhere in East Auckland, we ended up on the shoreline. And at first we weren't taking it in, but then we were looking at the islands, and one of the islands' names was Motutapu, and that came up. And we're looking at it, and it's just Brendan here. He's photographing in New Zealand and in Tonga. So as you see in this image, this is the maunga. So this is the sacred maunga of our area. Maunga meaning mountain, and this is one of the Ngai Tai's maungas. It's been sadly half quarried away by the settlers to make roads, and ultimately the road that led them to war to take over the Waikato tribes. So there's a lot of sad history wrapped in there, but we stood on Ohuiarangi, that's the name of this maunga, and we looked out towards the ocean and the view that it gave. And Motutapu, if you can see, there's that Rangitoto island, the one that goes up, and to the right there's a greener low-lying one, which is Motutapu. And this name kept coming up, Motutapu. And then I started to look more into it, and Motutapu appears in Tongatapu in Tonga, in Rarotonga in Cook Islands, and Tahiti, and right in Tamaki in Auckland. So for me, it's a trail I'm going to dig. So I start to research, I start to travel there. Brendan and I start to go over by ferry. We stay on the island, we traverse the island, and then we actually travel to Tonga, to the Motutapu in Tonga. Not only was this a bastion, but it was an entrance. It was a type of portal. History is often landlocked, but earlier times, the ocean, the moana, was your highway. So you entered from the highway, and you never went directly to the mainland. So in the case of Tonga, in the time of Heketa, which is an ancient settlement, it was the ancient capital, a compound that the Tuitonga, that the king lived in. This was built by the Ha'amaui, and the name of the entranceway, Ha'amaui. Ha'amonga Maui is the entranceway. So I started to see these things. It was a customs of sort. It was a middle ground. There was to be no warfare that took place on Motutapu. And the same went for Tonga, the same went for Rarotonga, and the same went for Tahiti. the trauma of colonization, and Tonga was spared from being colonized. We have our own monarchy, but still it was very influenced by thinking, and the perspectives changed rapidly over that time period, and we lost some knowledge. We retained a lot, but we lost some knowledge and practices, and I'm really interested in digging deeper about this whole safe space, this middle ground that Motutapu was. As we read in recordings from William Mariner, the High Chief never left directly to Vava'u. He went to Whangaimotu or Motutapu. There was a passageway, there was a process that you approached people, and I'm interested how we now today approach people in our relationships, how we approach different situations, events, and I'm learning those things now living in Tonga. Missionaries came to the Pacific, and they came with the message of the gospel, which Jesus Christ, of love and peace and mercy and forgiveness. But unfortunately, many of them didn't display that. They taught something but lived something else, and many of them used the access they gained to the people of the moana, and they used it to abuse it and to take land. And what I find, not just in New Zealand but in Tonga especially, there's a separation, there's a divorce between sacred and secular. So what we used to see as tapu is no longer tapu. Tapu is shifted to a lot of the church practices, and that's where we have a lot of our tapu. But tapu was really focused on our relationship between one another and dealing with the environment as well. May it be there will be tapu on certain fishing areas or times of the year that and there was a stronger relationship between man and his environment. But this divorce, what happened was tapu became taboo. So I don't know if you know, but the word taboo, actually comes from Tonga. So when Captain Cook came, he came to a time when they had the inasi ceremony, and the inasi was the first fruits offering to the king, when the people who were all under the Tuitonga's reign came and gave a tithe, a 10% or an offering to the king. And Captain Cook happened to be there at this time, and he was, fascinated. He wanted to learn whatever. And he kept trying to come into this sacred ceremony, and there were warriors, and it's recorded from many of their diaries. They kept pushing him back and saying, "Ikai, tapu, ikai, tapu," and he's like, "Taboo, taboo. What is this?" Because that's their translation of taboo. Taboo, taboo is like forbidden. Taboo is like, So what he did, they asked him to take his shirt off and let down his hair, and then he'd be allowed in. But as an Englishman, I just couldn't do that. He just couldn't do that. It was below himself. So I think he just let his hair down. But to take off his top and show his chest, that was just like, whoo, it's getting a bit low. But what's happened is it's compartmentalized now, where what we do on Sunday at church is tapu, but during the week it's secular. There's this divorce. But in our ancient times, the tufunga, may it be a fisherman or tātatau, a tattooist, what he did was considered sacred. So now we have a separation, but I think it's important that we go back to these stories and go back to these ancient processes that we could learn to adopt and adapt them back into today. I think this would even be a fight, or would fight against climate change, the way we treat cycles, the way we treat our environment around us, instead of overfishing, there would be a tapu on those fishing areas at certain times of the year. And the thing with taboo is there's a connotation, it's seen as shame. Where tapu wasn't a shameful thing, where taboo now, we've embraced this idea of, oh, that's taboo. We don't talk about sex in Tonga because it's taboo. So there's this thing of shame, and it's a covering, and it's things that are hidden, and it festers. But there was I think back then, far more openness towards a variety of issues, and I think we need to go back to a lot of that approach. Just an openness and nothing hidden. This is an image of Brennan Kito. We're standing in a village Golonga in a Catholic graveyard, and it's looking to Motutapu in Tonga, right across that passageway. So in the ancient times, there's a gap in this a reef break where the ships would pass to and from Motutapu to land in this area, Utukakai, and from there they would journey to Heketa, to the ancient capital of that time. Migration across the water plays a huge part in Tongan history, and as I've come to learn, being in Tonga, like, Tongans didn't just migrate far, they migrated within Tonga a lot. And I've even discovered that with my own family. And, you know, this journey of mine is very personal, and it's connected to my family history so much. And yeah, it gets quite emotional because I start to understand more of who I am and my place in this world. And I think that's important as people become more disconnected with the land, and they're seeking more material things over the intangible, like their lineage and who they are and the stories that they come from, and telling those stories. I've discovered, you know, my father's side is the Work family, and they're a clan from Orkney Islands in the north of Scotland who are Norwegian but came under Scottish rule. And my great-grandfather migrated to Christchurch in New Zealand on a tall ship. And, you know, sometimes we don't want to address that side of us in New Zealand because a lot of the colonial settlers and what happened at that time. But that is a part of my history and my story that I still am yet to explore as much as I am my Tongan side. And being situated in Tonga, finding out more and more about my own family. Okay, so something that I found distressing is the plastics and the pollution and the trouble that we're having with recycling, and especially even in Tonga. You know, it saddens me that this is the source of a lot of our food, yet there's a lot of waste that is getting disregarded into it. So this is an image from Motutapu, and while we were there, also just trying to pick up and utilize, recycle different plastics. So what I've done is I've taken the bits of plastic and I've tried to reuse it, but also use them as tools. So dragging it in the wet paint to get these effects, and then also that's recycling in a way and doing my little part. But I'm trying to bring the environment into my work, not only aesthetically, but using those bits of plastic rubbish as tools. And you can see that once again on the right side with shifting sands. So these are some of my current works that I'm working on with Brendan. This will work towards an exhibition throughout the islands and another publication. Well, definitely Tamaki, Auckland, in Tongatapu, and Rarotonga. So we will travel to Rarotonga. It's looking like February. So definitely showing in those 3 locations. And then having a book launch in those 3 locations. And then we're also looking into Tahiti, because Brendan is part Tahitian, and there is a motutapu there. But we're still trying to figure out the logistics of that. If anyone can speak French. Another part of my works is utilizing text. So what I was fascinated with in the ngatu was the font that they used. This was introduced by early missionaries, but what the women of Tonga did was they created like these text boxes. So if you look at the ngatu, often all the writing was within a text box, and that also created the style of font with that kind of cut off, that flat top and the flat bottom, because the text was being written in this box. And the reason that the women were writing in this box, I believe, was because it would the text would not get lost within all the kupesi's designs and the textures that are coming through the ngatu. Because if you see it without the text box, it gets lost sometimes. But yeah, so incorporating text into my work has been a main part of what I do. I think it also plays along that history of New Zealand painting and with text. And to finish, like I said earlier, this is very personal for me, and from 2011, from seeing that vision, which ultimately led us to be in Tonga, which we were supposed to be, because I wouldn't be sitting in Hong Kong today, because I wouldn't have met these lovely curators. For me, I have to follow those leadings. It's where I'm supposed to be, and things fall in place. We lived in Tonga for 2 years now, coming up 2 years, and for the first year and a half, we drove down the same road. It's a 10-minute drive from our house to town, and we passed this graveyard called Takaonove, and one of my cousins was named by my grandmother, Baia Takaonove, meaning alone in this graveyard. My grandmother named her, and I thought, what a strange name, being named after a graveyard. And then my mum explained to me, it's because my mum's father, my granddad, is buried there. We're not from the main island. She didn't grow up on the main island, but he was sick, and he was taken on a boat to the hospital in Nuku'alofa, where he died. And the surgeon of the time, he was from my mother's village, and he had some land in the grave, so he said just to bury him there. My grandmother's buried back in our family cemetery in Vava'u, yet here is my granddad. And over time, as my grandmother passed away and others, just because of life, and maybe it's not tapu to them, they actually lost where he was buried. He died in 71, and for me, this is so strange. Like, granddad, who we don't have a photograph of, is buried there, and I drive past every day and no one knows where he is. So I kept asking and asking, and then I rang my mother, and you know, sometimes it takes the half Tongan, half New Zealander to come over and push and push and push, because everyone else is like, eh. And they say, oh, he's on this side of the cemetery, on Salote Road, on the side. There's a little side bit over there, by the tree. Very Tongan instructions. By the tree. I was like, there's heaps of trees. So I went there a few times myself and just wondered, and I stood over all these broken graves and half buried, and I was like, is this my granddad? Is this my granddad? And then, it was a year and a half later, this auntie who lives on an outer island got on an 8-hour ferry ride finally came down, and she said, I vaguely remember it's around here. It's in front of the house. It's always adjacent to something. I was like, okay. So we went there, and none of my male cousins were able to come, but here's my auntie and my cousin Litea and my wife Yaeli, who took the photo. And we walking up and down here, and then this man reverses his car, and he's like, what are you looking for in Tongan? And they're like, oh, we're looking for, this, our granddad, our father. And oh, you know what? I remember a grave that was there a long time ago, but it's been buried over time. And that was the exact place that my auntie was going, I think it's here, around here, I don't know, yeah. So through that confirmation, we started to dig. And I don't know about you, who wants to go to a graveyard and start digging in strangers' graves? And I'm like, ooh, please don't hit the bones, please don't hit the bones. I can't handle that. But we dug, and as you see, that's sand. So that's grass that's grown over sand. So Tongan burials, then there's a whole mound of sand that's put on top. So we're on the right track. And as we started to dig, we found the brickwork, and we uncovered the brickwork around where he was buried. So we didn't have to go to where he was actually lying. And here we are, how many years later, and we find his grave, and we're currently in the process. And then another thing took place at the same time. Was I was asking my mum, there are 17 clans in Tonga, and everyone can hohoko, or their genealogy goes back to one of them. And my mother said, I don't know which one we are. And I'm like, oh, that's really sad. I really want to know. And everyone in the family had some made up little version, or just didn't know. It stopped at my great-granddad. Everyone didn't know. And then someone suggested this old man that might be still alive in Vava'o. And I had to Facebook my cousin, Messenger. It took her 1 year to go down the road and ask for this old man. 1 year, and I'm just like, please not be dead. Please not be dead. He happened to be still alive in his old age, and he's the only one with this written family tree of my grandfather who's lying in that grave. And it goes all the way back to 1773 and beyond. And here we now know our ha'a latu hifo. And we know who our great-granddad is, our great-great-granddad, and our great-great-great-granddad, and it goes on and on. And it grounds us even more. And it grounds us in our relationship to others, but also to the space, to the land that they came from as they migrated around Tonga. So I just want to thank you for all being here. You could all be somewhere else, but you chose to be here, so I just want to thank you. So if you have any questions, that would be great too. I'll just get Tuna to answer them for you.
So did you get into details to study the family tree? Because to actually identify the names and to place them.
Yes, we are currently doing that. And then also, it's been interesting. There was a little period that we had to convince our relatives this was truly our family tree. Because everyone had kind of their own little oh no, we come from here. But that was incorrect. As it was the names. In Tongan families, you pass the names down. So my grandma was a litea. There's about 10 liteas in our family, but those are clues. They're like portals. So, yes, there's a name. So my great-grandfather was called Semisiku Limoyanga. That name is a doorway to the 1700s. That is the clue that leads you to the...
And the old man, was he part of your family? Is that why he had the family tree?
Yes, he comes down one of the other lines, distant. But apparently, when my granddad was alive, he was buried there, which is very common in Tonga, he took on a nickname as his surname. Changed the name 3 times. So my mother and they grew up with this nickname, surname. It's very common. And that that's why we lost the true name.
And are you now convincing them to change to go back to the true name?
Everyone's on board, and my uncle, he is the one that is actually, we need a bit more proof so we can go legally change it. Yeah.
And will you take the name as well and get rid of your European name?
Oh, come on now. I would add it to my name. I wouldn't take away work. It would break my dad's heart.
And do you know what clan you're coming from in Scotland?
Yes. Oh, the work.
Oh, that's it.
It is, yeah. But because of their history, their Norwegian history, they don't do tartan, they don't do all that. They've got their own culture, and it's more Viking. Yeah. So I need to go up there.
More islands.
Yes, more islands. Any more questions?
With the process, wasn't there a story about also a tree root within the grave as well? Wasn't that part of the story, or is that a different story with your aunt?
No, that's true. So in the 80s or 90s, around 80s or 90s, my auntie, who was pictured there, digging with us, she had an illness around her neck, her throat, and it got worse and worse and worse. She went to the hospital, got worse and worse. She's taking all these different medicines. So maybe Tuna can explain a bit more about it, but they went to the grave because they believed there was a root that was growing to my granddad's bones that was affecting her. So they went and redug the grave, and there was a root that had grown into the grave around the skeleton. So they cut that and surrounded it with some corrugated iron so that no other trees or roots could take root in there. And she became well.
And with your grandfather, is there a notion that his remains should be eventually returned to Vava'u?
Yeah, I think that came up just as we rediscovered him, but we haven't had that conversation with the wider family yet. I think it would be great, but maybe that also acknowledges his connection, because his genealogy comes back to the main island. So maybe that's a nice anchor for us, because I grew up going to Vava'u, so I didn't really have connection to the mainland or knowledge of it. Now I do. I've been learning and living there. But it is nice that he's there and we drive past every day.
I'm very touched by, once you now move back to Tonga, you're experiencing a lot of identity searching journeys, and I'm curious what this influence on work is already happening, or are you planning to narrate what you've been discovering and in artistic practices?
It's definitely being threaded through, but that was what I was contemplating, because there's a prominent Tongan artist actually that is in our family tree that we've discovered that we didn't realise we were relatives. Yeah. And I had a thought, Kuli Moyanga, stone maka. Yeah, he is an amazing artist, and he uses a technique on canvas that's from Ngatu Uli. So the smoking process, he smokes the canvas, and beautiful work. So he actually has the same name as my great granddad, and we've known each other but didn't know that we were family. So there was that idea I was thinking on, maybe collaborating with him, or just seeing where it goes.